Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Exotic Car Facts, the Pundits Podcast. I am your host, the real deal, Deal Neil. And once again, I want to say welcome back and thank you for tuning in and listening to the podcast. Just wanted to start off today's episode by talking about the benefits of working with a car broker or a exotic car broker. Me and a good friend of mine were actually just having a conversation this morning about auto brokers and car brokers and kind of what they do and why they're important. And it was such a great conversation. I decided to go ahead and make a podcast about it because there's a lot of great information that we talked about, and I wanted to share that with you guys as well. So, when you're looking at car brokers and auto brokers and what they actually do, a lot of people kind of chalk it up to them just being middlemen. And, to a great degree, I mean, that's exactly what they are. An auto broker or a car broker is basically somebody who typically will work with a customer or their client in order to try to negotiate the best deal possible for them on a automobile purchase. And really and truly, most people think to themselves, hey, why do I need to insert someone else into a transaction like buying a car? It's a pretty straightforward process. And, most people say, well, I can work out a deal or I can get a good deal on a car or I don't need somebody else to come in and, you know, work out a price because, yeah, most auto brokers that I know, myself included, we'll negotiate a good deal for you, but we also need to get paid as well, whether that's through an upfront, flat fee, or whether it's a commission contingent on the amount of money that you save when you actually buy the car, and there's contracts involved for that, and so on and so forth. But again, most people look at it and they say, well, I'm just buying a car. I should be able to work out a pretty good deal on my own. And the money that I'll save, from not having to pay somebody else, like a dealer or a broker, third party broker or, something like that, that's money that, can go back into my pocket and I don't have to pay somebody else, which is true. However, when you consider the fact that on average, most people don't buy a car every day. I would say that a majority of people typically don't buy a car even every 2 to 3 years. In my experience, most people will typically hang on to that car as long as possible. And if you're financing the car for 60 months, most people will want to try to hang on to that car until they've paid it off. For a lot of people, that's a big deal, being able to pay off their car and then enjoy that car without having to have that car note, to try to get a little bit more value out of it and stretch their dollar. And so, if you're looking at the fact that most people would not typically swap out a car unless they had to, which might be 5 years down the road, 7 years, even 10 years down the road, it puts the casual car buyer at a significant disadvantage because unless you're actively involved in the industry and you've got your finger on the pulse and you're constantly looking at vehicle prices and target prices and seeing what the market is doing, unless you're product knowledge specialist and what the trends are and what the values of the vehicle that you're interested in, your target vehicle is, and where it's trending and what it's going to be selling for. If you're forecasting and you look down the road a little bit to see what the value of the car is going to be, a lot of times you're at a great disadvantage because when you go into a dealership, you know you're basically trusting that the salesperson who's working for the dealership, um, the dealership F&I manager who's working on getting you funding um, to do the deal, and also, the inventory manager and the dealership itself who's selling the vehicle, you're basically walking in there and it's kind of like three against one, if you're a customer, because you don't really have an advocate on your side who's really working for the best deal for you. I mean, the dealership is going to protect its interest, and its goal is to provide good service. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't, but you have to understand that the dealership is also in the business of making a profit, and a lot of times they're trying to make the maximum profit that they can per deal, because that's business. And that being the case, without having a product knowledge specialist who's actually working on your side to try to work out a deal that's um, at least fair and balanced as far as protecting your interest and what you're wanting out of the deal versus, the dealership getting a fair deal for what they're trying to accomplish with selling the car. A lot of times, as a consumer, um, you could definitely make a misstep that would cost you thousands of dollars later on down the road. And I mean, there's plenty of horror stories, I'm sure, all over the internet about people who overpay for a car. And typically, it's not even just the car itself. I mean, the actual vehicle itself is usually, um, you know, relatively fairly priced when you think about it. And you can check that with Kelly Blue Book and some other things, other resources online to see what the car values are and what they estimate the target value or target price, retail price for that car should be, so that are you paying more, are you paying less compared to other people? Which again, that's not necessarily ensuring that you're getting the best deal. It's just saying that other people like yourself, have paid this much on average for this vehicle, and depending on your personal negotiation skills and how well you're able to hammer out a deal, you may be better or worse at negotiating a good deal to get that car. So, with that being said, again, an exotic car broker, especially, someone who's got their finger on the pulse of the industry and what's going on in the marketplace, who's looking at the trends, who's maybe got a relationship with certain dealerships, who can help to incentivize the broker to bring in customers to that dealership to help facilitate deals. An auto broker can be a great and invaluable resource because, again, depending on how much you're actually paying the broker, if it's a fair price, a flat fee to help find, first of all, a great car, to source that vehicle, then to try to work on your behalf to negotiate um, a very competitive price on the deal and still have you come out of the deal even after paying the broker, his cut or his fee for the work that he's doing. If you still come out ahead or even lower than what you'd be able to negotiate on your own through a dealership, then yeah, that seems like it would be the best of all possible outcomes for everyone. To work with somebody who's working on your behalf, who for a small fee is able to get you a better deal than you'd be able to negotiate on your own, and get you a better quality car, and maybe even get you access to some more exclusive inventory that you may not even be aware of. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight a few things and go down a few bullet points about um, you know exotic car brokers and auto brokers in general that you may or may not be aware of, and just to touch on a few points that, again, when you're looking to hire a broker, it's very similar to the process of buying a house in a lot of ways. And for most people, you go out and you get a realtor, and you have your agent, your buyer's agent is what we used to call them, and that person is actively searching for inventory, maybe in the MLS, the database that shows what listings are available, whether it's through you know, their own broker or through you know, just listings at large. But your buyer's agent is out there looking for potential properties that you'd be interested in buying. And then part of that is working with the seller's agent, if they have one, to try to work out a price that works for everyone, that everyone's willing to pay and sell for, as well as the commissions, and how that's going to work out to get you to the table to where you'll actually be able to do that transaction. But the big difference is that your agent is working for you, the seller's agent is working for the seller of the home. Um, when you go to the closing, obviously, you have your own lender, I'm sure, that's providing finance to cover the deal. And then you go through a third party, typically a title company, who's going to actually handle the paperwork, the documents, and the transaction of finalizing the deal and getting everything properly um, recorded. So when you look at a car dealership, a traditional car dealership, you know, you as a customer, you're walking in to um, a situation where even your salesperson, works for the dealership. So they're not necessarily your advocate or your agent. In fact, they actually work for the person who's selling the vehicle or the property in that case. So when you think about it, the person who's showing you the car is selling you on the vehicle because they want to make a sale for the dealership, and their compensation is tied directly to how well they do at selling you the car so that they can get paid by the dealership. Um, the F&I manager, the finance manager, you know, when they're trying to get you financing, they're not trying to work out the best rate for you per se. Uh, they're looking to see, what's the best rate that they could do that would allow you to purchase the car and still allow the dealership to get their points on the dealer reserve, so they can get paid by the lender that's going to finance the deal. And then the dealership itself, who's controlling the inventory, obviously, if they have a vehicle in inventory, they want to make sure that they're profitable and that they're not, taking a loss on the inventory, which I can't imagine any dealership, at least not a profitable one, taking a haircut and losing money on any vehicle that they're trying to retail, unless they just got into it for too much and it's just a really bad dealer. It's a sale proof car that they're having to give away for some reason. But typically, dealers are going to get into their inventory, or they're going to acquire their inventory at a price point that still allows them to be very profitable. And even if they say, well, I'm giving it to you at cost, again, once you look at the dealer pack that's been added in there and other add-ons that go with the car, the dealer has a certain amount of profit that's already built into the price of acquiring that car. So they're not going to lose money, even if they, you know, even if they sold the car to you, quote unquote, at their acquisition cost, it would still be profitable for them. And chances are you're not going to get it for their acquisition cost, especially if it was a car that they took in on trade. Chances are the previous customers already um, taking a haircut on that, and they're going to lowball the trade to make sure they've got enough of a buffer and a margin in there to where they can still be profitable when they sell that car at retail, even if they had to come down off the price, quite a bit. And like I said, you've got so many add-ons with dealer fees and other miscellaneous fees that they can actually pad the deal with, that if you're not savvy, if you don't know what you're looking at when you're looking at the deal sheet to sign out everything, you still will end up uh, getting back to a place where you're paying more for that vehicle um, than you probably could get it for less, but without knowing what the um, acquisition cost of that vehicle is, and also what the market value of that vehicle is and what you should be paying, without having that kind of information or that kind of knowledge, you just never know. I mean, you could be paying a few $1,000s above what the dealer paid for that car, or you could be paying significantly more, and you just would never know, because without a frame of reference to know and understand how much margin a dealer has, you would just never know what they're into the car for. Um, so I said all that to say this, typically when you're working with a exotic car broker, somebody who knows the market and maybe has access to dealer tools, such as market reports, someone who's actually looked at the trends and who's actually studied, you know, where that particular vehicle model is going to be going and what they've been selling for, and also is aware of um, you know certain incentives that dealerships may have to sell a car. Working with an auto broker is actually, in my opinion, definitely a worthwhile endeavor, especially when it comes to um, more expensive or more rare or exotic vehicles that you may be speculating on as far as an investment vehicle. And when it comes to those types of cars, especially a collector quality car, you do want somebody who's got good experience with that particular um, make and model and brand, and also that specific vehicle, to be able to kind of point out some of the potential pitfalls and things to look out for when you're buying that car, and to help kind of guide you through the process so that you don't end up making a very expensive or costly mistake, um, you know, as you're looking for a car. And I see cars all the time, and I speak with people all the time, and kind of consult with them to discuss pricing and the market on certain vehicles, especially exotic cars. And you'd be surprised that um, the prices on certain vehicles is all over the map, just depending on what type of car it is, based on perceived popularity of different vehicles. And at the end of the day, I mean, a car is only worth what somebody else is willing to pay you for it. Whether you're a dealer or even a private seller, um, you know, even if the market is saying that your car is worth, $100,000, if you can't get anybody to pay you $100,000 for that car, then, it's really only worth what somebody's willing to write you a check for today. And that's really what sets the market and tells you what the actual market is, and what the actual market value of different vehicles is. Because as I go online, and even I'm on sites like Cars Gurus and Auto Trader, eBay, all the time, and I'm also looking at the market reports and comparing the prices that dealers are paying for inventory versus um, what these cars are being advertised online for. And you'll see about anywhere from a ten to $20,000 float, and that's kind of the disparity in prices. Because at any given time, you may have someone who just decides that they want to pay more for a particular make and model of car, and it'll show up as a completed listing, even though that the market price on that car may not be um, consistent with what they should have paid. They may overpay for it just because they don't know any better. And so that skews the market, because then other people see those listings and they think, oh, well, somebody paid X amount for this car, so, my car must be worth, that much as well. And so they kind of hold out for more money. And again, in a fair market system where, you know, the market basically dictates the demand and the price, again, if someone is willing to pay a significant amount above the average, or if they're even paying, an advertised price for a particular vehicle, um, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad or a good thing. It just means that a lot of people are misinformed, even some dealers, and they end up paying a lot more for vehicles than they should, which creates a bubble, because once the market does inevitably adjust, they're kind of left holding the bag on vehicles that they got into for too much, and they're not able to get out of them um, without taking a significant loss. or holding the vehicle for a very long time. And even if you don't drive the car, um, just holding the vehicle, I mean, there are going to be holding costs that are associated with any exotic car. Even if it's just basic maintenance, tires, or battery, paying for your monthly insurance premiums. Um, every month that goes by that you're holding an exotic car, you're investing money into it that you may not be able to recoup that particular investment. Um, just depends on how much your actual holding costs are. And again, that varies on a case by case basis, depending on the car and what you've got into it. But definitely something to consider because that's something that a lot of people don't talk about is the actual holding cost of the vehicle when you buy an exotic car. Um, and so that's also something to consider. Um, a few other things I wanted to touch on as far as working with a broker. Um, I spoke in the last episode, I believe, about um, getting your dealer's license and stuff like that. And there's been a couple of you that have actually gone out and completed the pre-licensing course, which is great. I think it's actually a good idea for anybody who's interested in cars in general. Even if you never going to get your dealer's license, to actually take that 16-hour pre-licensing course. And like I said, you can usually do it online. I don't have a dog in the fight, so I don't really um, can't recommend any one particular course over another. I don't get paid to recommend them, and I'm not endorsing any one over the other. But if you find a online course, it's actually good information to have because the more you can actually think like a dealer, and the more you're in that mindset and you understand, um, you know, car sales as a whole, and you start to think and look at things through the eyes of a dealer, then it actually helps you to be more informed, first of all, which is always great. But it also, moreover, it helps you to identify deals or potential deals where there is a great opportunity to make, maybe a profit on a flip. Um, but if nothing else, it also helps you to be more aware of, some of the things that are going on behind the scenes when you go into negotiate a car deal or when you go to look at a car. And it helps you speak the same language as the dealer so that you kind of cut through some of the song and dance and some of the games that, could potentially be played when you're trying to negotiate a good deal. Because at the end of the day, the dealer does have margins that they're trying to cover. Um, they've got expenses that they're trying to cover. They're wanting to make a certain amount of profit, and they're wanting to sell cars. And again, it's business, so it's not anything personal. And I don't feel like there should be an antagonistic relationship between customers and dealers. A lot of people, they hate going to car dealerships because of the stigma of, the high pressure sales and aggressive salesmen who are trying to make their quota and push cars on them. And, you get to the dealership and, they take your keys for your trade and they hide them, or, the inventory manager goes to lunch with your keys and you can't leave the dealership. And so they just try to wear you down a lot of times with some of the games, or, they get you in and out of cars, get you to test drive a bunch of cars until you get to the point where it's just sensory and information overload and you get fatigued as a customer and you're not really thinking clearly, and you may not make a great decision because they're throwing all kinds of numbers at you and they're talking about, your down payment and your trade value and other things. And so, again, unless you're buying and selling cars all the time and you're hearing these terms and the phrases and you're familiar with the numbers and the financial breakdown, a lot of it becomes overwhelming. And at the end of the day, as a customer, you want to make sure that you're making an informed decision and that you're buying the vehicle that's right for you, that you're getting into it at a fair price that is competitive, if not a steal. I mean, which again, if you're able to work out a deal that turns out to be a steal and you're able to make some money on it, on flipping the car, then that's great too. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that um, you're working with the best information possible, and that you're not making a decision just based on emotion, or you just get tired of being at the dealership, so you just concede and you just kind of um, settle for whatever it is that you think is the best offer that they've offered to you, instead of going back and regrouping and doing your homework and coming back when you have a clear head. And so you just want to be aware of those types of things and make sure that you're protecting yourself as a consumer by educating yourself with the best tool of all, which is knowledge. I highly recommend that, even if you're not actively in the market right now, that if you do have a particular vehicle that you're interested in, a specific make or model, either go out and start looking at them and kind of familiarize yourself with the market, test drive them if possible, without having to have the additional pressure of having to make a decision about buying the car. Because especially, if you wait till you need a car, or you're desperate to get into a car, or, most people, if you were to get into a significant car collision or something like that and you had to replace the vehicle immediately, um, because you're just kind of jumping into the water in the deep end and you're trying to make a snap decision. You think about it, if you're only buying a car every 5 to 10 years and you're jumping in to make a decision that has to be made immediately within usually a couple of days, you're not really going to be well prepared mentally, or mentally equipped with all the best information that you could possibly have if you're trying to rush through and sort through a lot of information and data, just kind of spur of the moment. So again, you just want to make sure that you kind of keep your finger on the pulse of the market if you're really interested in exotic cars, and I hope that you are if you're listening to this podcast. And also taking as many resources as you can to familiarize yourself with the process and what to expect. I talk about the buying experience at length in my book, Exotic Car Facts. Um, you know, and the nice thing about it is the more familiar you are with the process and what's going to be expected of you when you go to a dealership, the better off you're going to be, and the more chance that you're going to come out of it having made a great deal, and um, you'll typically come out ahead. And at the very least, if you spot a bad deal, or if you can't work out a good deal or something that you feel comfortable with, you'll have the confidence to be able to get up and walk away from the table and maybe look at other resources, whether that's going through an auto broker to try to help guide you through some of the finer nuances of the deal, or even doing your own research to educate yourself as far as what you should be paying for a car, doing your homework, getting a proper, inspection done on the vehicle, um, some of the um, common things that go wrong with the car, routine maintenance, reliability, maybe even looking at other owners' experiences, or, um, networking, or communicating with people who currently own that particular vehicle to try to get their feedback about um, the quality of the car as a whole, as a brand, and their ownership experience. Because at the end of the day, unless you're buying cars all the time, unless you're actively in the marketplace all the time, unless you're always looking at cars like I do, then there's a good chance that you're not really going to be very well prepared or informed to make a buying decision, or make the best buying decision. And you know, worst case scenario, you'll overpay for a vehicle that you probably